Okay, hi, I'm Ramona Jan,
There
and
we
this is
go.
Andre Turan, and together we are JANTURAN. What we're going to do is we're going to sing a few of our original acoustic songs first, and then, as Tony said, we're going to then have an interview. We are in upstate New York. It took us 4 hours to get here. We took an extra hour for the Throgs Neck Bridge. Is there an animal named Throgs? I mean, is the bridge shaped like the neck of the throg? Or is it the throg's legs?
Something to Google.
Yeah. So anyway, this first song is actually about the railroad, which goes through Calhoun, where we live. The Erie Railroad goes through there. And also just about the railroad in general. My grandfather was an immigrant to this country, Italian, and he helped build and lay the Santa Fe Railroad, and he lost a leg during that, and then they fired him, and he couldn't speak English, so he then bought a wooden leg from a catalog, and then he walked to work another job 3 miles each way on his wooden leg. So this is a song called Santa Fe.
Just another stop. Woo, on the byway, honey, aboard the Atchison, Topeka, Kansas City, Santa Fe. He got some work up in Wichita, and she went along for a small song with a baby on the way. Bump on the rail caused a drinking spell, too much time to kill up in Leadville. That's where we left her yesterday. It's just another stop. Woo, on the byway, sugar, aboard the Atchison, Topeka, Kansas City, Santa Fe. Another teardrop, woo, on the call me crazy, gone round the bend. No matter how insane, that hell of a train will someday bring us back. It's just another stop, ooh, on the byway, baby, aboard the Kansas City, Santa Fe. Another teardrop, ooh, on the railway, my darling, aboard the Santa Topeka, Kansas City, Santa Fe. All you need know. Thank you.
As I said, we're from Calhoun, New York, and in 1921, at a hotel called the Western Hotel, which still exists, there was a murder of a girl named Laura Darling. And this is the absolute true story. I read all the transcripts from the court, so here it goes.
In a place by the river, a murder of crows takes the sky. There's a sense of unease to the wind in the trees as seasons roll on by. And in the Western Hotel, where some men come and go, the alluring Laura Darling, my friend, puts on the finest show. One night she went out dancing with a stranger unredeemed. As they sailed across the floor, past the ballroom door, the parlor lady screams. Laura Darling is counting her sword in a fish. She's at Nesta forever. Guess who loves it when everyone stares? Now somewhere in the shadows, a hammer came striking down, and a bullet meant for that stranger was sent, putting Laura in the ground. Her husband was tried for murder, but the jury set him free. Now at the hotel, there's some kind of spell, and the ghost only man can see. Laura Darling is counting her sword in a fish. She's Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to talk about when I was an audio engineer in New York City in the 70s. But what a lot of people don't know is what did I do after that? Well, I ended up on the street. I ended up on the street with a group called Venus Flytrap. And we sang all over Europe. I sang over with Lisa Lowell and Susie Tyrell. You might recognize those voices because they currently sing with Bruce Springsteen. So this is a song called Sally Vagabond that sort of wrote about that time.
In a faded blue tutu, a girl on a quest with burgundy hair, strategically messed, sleeps in an airport before boarding a plane, lands wide open and somewhat insane, and the rain falls as summer calls through the walls of her empty halls. Sally Vagabond, where, girl, have you gone? Her voice doesn't carry, but she carries it far across the Riviera in a broken guitar, and the dream she keeps here that everyone sees blows round the town, a feather in the breeze.
Yeah, Andre just reminded me that because it's March, the Women's Month, we're doing as many female name songs as we could. So this one is called Mary Ann, and it's written from a series of love letters between Leonard Cohen and his common wife, Mary Ann, but they were interestingly written after she had passed away. So he wrote all these letters to her, to which she could not respond.
No, she might have. Birds in the rye, deeper shade of blue. Lost afternoons, a stray dragonfly, or carry me to you. As autumn starts undressing trees, and winter blows them bare. When blossoms pirouette with ease, it's you that lingers there. Mary Ann, I'm not far behind. Just reach out your hand, Mary Ann, and we'll meet somewhere down the line to kick around that old tin can. Mary Ann, Mary Ann. Oh, mercy me, a madman am I, to miss you like I do. It's hard to believe our last kiss goodbye marked a final breath for you. Now shining stars trace your face in lonely nights above. Even skies as plain as day recall our endless love. Mary Ann, I'm not far behind. Just reach out your hand, Mary Ann, and we'll meet somewhere down the line to kick around that old tin can. Mary Ann, Mary Ann, for I am old and near the end of journey, tough and true. Then stay another day, my friend, I'd sooner be with you. Mary Ann, I'm not far behind. Just reach out your hand, Mary Ann. Mary Ann, Mary Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll do one more song, And I don't think this song needs much of an introduction. It's an original of ours. It's called The One Who Got Away. We've all experienced that.
Just double check my tuning here real quick, sorry.
Okay, checking tuning.
I was the one who had to fly. I can't be undone that last goodbye. Now when the skies are broken blue, recalls your eyes, I'm missing you. And I know what you've been thinking. I got my freedom, and I'm just the kind of guy who'd never stay. Supposing I'm the one who slipped right through your fingers, well, I'm surely not the one who got away. I hear you cry inside the wind. So high and dry, my heart goes spinning. I meant to leave without a scar, but foolish thieves don't get too far. Now it's likely you've been thinking I might be happy, and I'll never dream of you a single day. Supposing I'm alone now with all of my wrongdoings, and you're the one who really got away. Yeah, maybe I'm the one still caught up in the thought of you, and you're the one who really got away. Yeah, you're the one who really got away. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. We were back. Andre, thank you so much. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. How about that? That was gorgeous. All right. So now we get to the little bit more into the side of the Inside the Musician's Mind program. To do the intro that I usually do, uh, many of you know me. I'm Tony Traguardo. I'm over in the reference department these days here at the library. We've been doing this program for a while. Format is based loosely, and I'm going to just have to do this. I have to take a moment of silence. We're based loosely on the format. James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. James Lipton passed this week, 92 years old, I believe, and he gave us an incredible collection of programs, and really just every time I would see an episode, I'd marvel at how incredible James Lipton was. So there's a little bit of the style of James Lipton mixed in with my dear friend Pete Fornatel, and I tried to sort of channel him when I do this. At the end of the event, you'll see the questions that James Lipton put out that were originated by Bernard Pivot and Marcel Proust. And as a lifelong music enthusiast, collector, historian, I often wonder what makes my favorite musicians, composers, and lyricists tick. Why do they do what they do? How do they do what they do? Basically, what goes on inside the musician's mind? So we venture into what promises to be interesting, fascinating, and possibly unusual places. And on each trip, I try to take all of you along with me. So without further ado, let me give a little bit of background on tonight's very special guest. Our special guest, Ramona Jan, was one of the premier new wave punk rockers of the 1980s, founding member of the Comateens. And I bring that up right away because they had a track called Get Off My Case, and I realized this morning we used to play the bejesus out of that on my radio show. So, also the version of the Munsters theme that you guys did was wonderful. Anyway, aside from that distinction, Ramona was also one of the very few women involved in recording engineering. She worked at the legendary Media Sound Studios. There's a jacket from Media Sound Studios down there. And later on Power Station. Throughout her career, she came into close contact and worked with the likes of the Talking Heads, Frank Sinatra, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Barry Manilow, Laura Nero, Madonna, the Ramones. And I copped this quote from a recent article about Ramona from the Vents magazine website. It said, playing a game like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon with Ramona might be an exercise in futility, as this great lady is connected directly to almost everyone who made the music scene in the 70s and 80s. Well, now you are all welcome to be 1 degree in separation from our guest. Please welcome Ramona Jan. Oh, there we go. Ta-da. Very nice. I like it. I like it. It looks cool. Wait, are we on? Brian? Are you powered on? Let's see. Let's get you. Let's see. We don't usually digital. Yeah, that's beautiful. There we are. Are we on?
Tighten that.
That was bad. See, that's what I did before. I was saying to
Tighten the
myself,
clip.
I'm setting up microphones for an audio engineer. Really? Anyway.
Okay, I'll fix it. There
Thank
you
you. Okay.
That's good now.
I'm going to start, as I always do, with some questions that sort of provide us with insight regarding how and why you came to do what you do.
Okay.
So I'm going to go all the way back. And these are, I think, sort of common things that run through musicians' lives and how they got to where they are. What was the first music that you remember hearing in your life that made an impression on you, that woke you up to the power of music?
A good impression?
Yeah,
Or
or
just
about any
any
impression.
impression?
Yeah.
Well, I remember hearing the Beatles, My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean.
Wow. Okay.
And my mother commenting on how awful it was. And then right after that, pretty soon after that, I Want to Hold Your Hand. And for my mother again commenting, they're just screaming. But for me, it would have been anything Motown.
Wow. Okay.
Supremes. Yeah, I actually, when I was 12 years old, I ordered an album off of the television. Do you remember these? Remember they advertised them and they were like $12, including the shipping. And when it came with no pictures, just music. And my mother used to whisper to my father, she likes that black music.
Wow.
but I don't think she said black. I'm not sure what she said. But it made me like wonder, what is she talking about, you know? So, and I never confronted her, but I did ask her, how come I hear like the same person singing their same voice together? How do they do that? I would ask her things about multi-tracking.
Wow.
Yeah,
Even so early on.
she either couldn't hear it and obviously didn't know.
Right.
Here's the irony of all that. The person who was working on those records back then was Tony Bon Jovi, who was the chief engineer at Media Sound, who I would later be trained by.
It all comes around.
Yeah.
That's wild. Now, what area did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I grew up, I lived most of my life in Manhattan, but I did grow up in New Jersey.
Okay.
Probably detect
Okay.
a little accent. I'll try to.
Bon Jovi land, New Jersey.
Not exactly Bon Jovi land, because that's southern New Jersey.
Okay. There you
Livingston,
go.
New Jersey, to be exact.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you may have answered this next question, but were your parents supportive of your interest in music when you started to get into it?
Hell no.
Ah!
First of all, my father was a sax player, jazz sax player. But no, there was no support at all. I had to buy myself my own piano when I was 14. I saved up babysitting money in 2 years.
Wow.
Bought it, paid for the movers, got it in the house, paid for my own lessons. You know, so my grandfather bought me my first guitar, which was a classical guitar. If you know anything about them, the neck is like really wide. And I probably have the same size hands. So it was really impossible to play.
Sure.
I was allowed to have 2 guitar lessons, and then that was it.
That's
So-
amazing. So when most young people are interested in buying a car or saving money for a car, you bought a piano. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Going back, what was the first live musical performance that you remember seeing, and what kind of impression did that make on you?
Okay, well, that would have had to be in high school. I had a group of friends who actually went to concerts, even at Madison Square Garden. So it probably was Rush,
Oh, wow.
and probably at the Felt Forum. Not my
Wow.
type of music, but in those days, you could just walk around the aisles. Do you remember those
Sure.
concerts?
Sure.
And, you know, so you could just walk around the aisles. It was like a scene, you know. You could walk up to the stage. You could put your elbows on the stage. You could take pictures with your flash bulbs, which I did many of. And nobody bothered you. There was no, like, gate before the stage or anything like that. So I just really loved the scene, but I was not a fan. I knew I had to be doing what they were doing.
And that
I
can-
did not think of myself as my friends were groupies, you know.
Right.
They were like, we're going to go see. I saw T-Rex in a bar because of them. I saw Genesis at Capitol Theater in New Jersey because of them. Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. I mean, I would have never gone to these concerts if it wasn't for Jessica and Debbie. And then they eventually came see me
And that's cool.
in Comateens.
Now, you brought me right to the next step. How did you end up becoming involved in music actively? And so when did you go from being a listener and an appreciator actually to a creator and a performer?
I was always writing songs during the time when I would go with my friends to see the bands. I didn't really make a connection between, it wasn't like I had a conscious thought of, I'm writing these songs so that I can get on stage. It wasn't like that at all. Just songs were in me and had to come out. So what was the question?
How did making the transition
The
from being an
transition.
appreciator to
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I moved to New York when I was 19, and that transition happened at Media Sound when I started working there, and I guess I should tell how that happened because that's key. I was living in the Hotel Bretton Hall. It's on 86th and Broadway. It's still there. Beautiful building, built in the 1920s. But when I moved into the Bretton Hall in 1975, it was the floor that I lived on was a brothel. And so it was a transition building, let's just say that. Because it was a brothel in there, People didn't want to move in, real people. So they made the rents very cheap. Just to give you an idea, my first apartment was $160 a month.
You can't pay
And
for parking in
on,
Manhattan.
on the 11th floor, overlooking Broadway, which was a really good, view, and Riverside, the park, and the river. And so they were attracting artists and musicians. In fact, they would advertise looking for artists, musicians to move into this Fleabag hotel. It was a residential hotel. They didn't say it like that, but that's what I fondly call it. So anyway, I worked for 1 month for the realtor who got me the apartment, but he didn't pay me. And there was a girl who was living in the building who was working at Media Sound, and she said, why don't you come down to Media Sound? You're a songwriter, and I'll record you. It won't cost you anything. And because she goes, I'm trying to be a recording engineer. It was something I'd never heard of. I said, sure, that sounded where I should be. And as soon as I walked into the place, it was just, I had to be there. So I asked for a job that day. I went up to the manager's office and asked if, can I apply for a job here? And they said, well, what do you want to be? And I had no secretarial skills, and I did want to be there. And I had to be in the studio. So I said, I want to be a recording engineer. And they said, are you a groupie? That was the only question. No paperwork, no resume, nothing. I said, no. So she said, well, why don't you talk to the owners? So then she took me up to the owners, and they actually asked me if I had any background in the taping. I actually thought if you touched tape, it would erase. So I decided to keep that quiet. And so I decided, well, at this point in time, I'm 19 years old. I'm in New York City. I have no job, no money. I've been here a month. I'm living in a brothel. I'm just going to lie. What could happen, really? So I said that my mother was an electrician and my father was a piano tuner. Truth was, my father was a hairdresser and my mother was a housewife. Well, this guy's jaw dropped open, and he was like, oh my God, can you start Monday? So you can get a job, a career in New York City in the 70s based on your DNA. That's what that boils down to. And you know what? His name was Bob Walters. He's not with us anymore. But he told that to everybody for the next 40 years, and I never corrected him. And he thought it. He said, when Ramona told me that her father was a piano tuner and her mother was an electrician, I just knew she had the stuff. And he said, can you start Monday? And I did, and that's how I started.
Brilliant. Now, you didn't perform at Woodstock, but there's an indirect connection to Woodstock.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Well, Media Sound was owned and opened. It was owned by John Roberts and Joel Rosenman and Bob Walters. But John and Joel were the main partners, main financial partners. And they are the financiers behind Woodstock. And Woodstock opened, Media Sound opened in July of '69. And Woodstock happened in August. Which is why they weren't there on the day of my interview, probably, because they should have been. I know they would have known the right questions to ask me.
Well, it's a good thing they weren't there, probably.
Actually, they would have known even less. Can I explain something?
Sure.
John and Joel both went to, Ivy League schools. Bob Walters was a trumpet player, a wedding band trumpet player. John and Joel would never know anyone. They never even rode the subway, ever in their lives. They would not know anyone. This is the thing. Back then, they had no connections to the world, the street, so that somebody would want a minimum wage job doing a technical thing. They're friends from Princeton and Yale. No, sorry, I don't want to be a recording engineer. Bob, do you know anyone? No, I only know musicians. So if you walked off the street back then and said, you want to be a recording engineer? Just a recording engineer coming out of your mouth. Totally qualified you. You know more about that than we do. But yes, can you start Monday? Actually, 3 new people started Monday.
Well, now, so you started at Media Sound. You began in the shipping department, which is where everyone
Everyone does.
apparently started. But now you greatly impressed everyone, right? And then within a few weeks, you were granted a promotion, right? That's exactly
No,
how
I'll
it
tell you
happened.
how it happened. It was the record-breaking winter of 1975. You can Google that. I was like, I moved from New Jersey to New York, and I was like, boy, the winters in New York are really hard. I don't know if I can survive this. I can survive everything else, the brothel, but everything else, but the winters? And I was on a foot messenger delivering packages 12 hours a day. And I was like, I got to get out of this. So two things happened. The head of the shipping department name was Peter. He was the head of shipping. He was never going to move up. Everyone else would move up. He didn't want to move up. Well, and here's another thing. There was no words for bullying or sexual harassment back then. He would sometimes, when I would come to work, he would be high, and he would like get this look on his eye, and he would grab me and put me up in the air and spin me around and throw me across the room onto a bunch of chairs. Yeah.
Wow.
I had to fear him going to work. I didn't know when he was going to do that. The look, his face would be, "Hi, Ramona." He'd be like that. And then I knew it was going to happen, and there was no way out of it because he was a big guy, big, strong guy. So he went on vacation, and I thought, see, in those days, what did I know? I mean, nobody talked about this kind of stuff. I decided, I think I'm going to tell the manager, the big manager of the studio, Susan Planer, who was a female. I think I'm just going to tell her that Peter's been actually throwing me around the room. Can you imagine that today? While he's on vacation, and hope to God he doesn't kill me when I get back. This is what my thinking was. So I went up there. I thought, it could be a bad thing that I tell her. It could be a good thing. So I told her, and she was very professional. She was also from an upper crust family, so she probably didn't know what the heck. She'd never heard of anything like this before. She said, "Okay, thank you for telling me this, Ramona." Well, she fired him. He never came back.
Wow.
And she made me the head of shipping. So this is now the way I'm getting to be an assistant engineer. When I saw that happen, when I saw that you could just say, okay, you were a shipper, now you're head of shipping, I figured, well, I could just say, now I'm an assistant engineer. So I hung out as the head of shipping for a while until a capable person showed up. And I said, "Bill," I walked in one day and I said, "Bill, guess what? I've been promoted. I'm the assistant engineer now, and you are the head of shipping." And I just walked into a session, and I said, "Hi, I'm on the session." And they said, "Okay, do this, do that, ba-da-da-da." I just started working. 2 weeks later, I'm working on all these sessions. I get called up to Susan Planer's office, and she says to me, "Ramona, you've been out of shipping you've been gone." She says, "You've been in studios, you've been assisting." She says, "You can't just promote yourself." And I'm like, I'm very George Costanza. I'm like, I can't? But I said, oh. But I wasn't going back there. I was not going back. I said, I can't deliver those packages in this cold weather anymore. I just can't. She said, "You're very lucky," she says, "because a spot opened up." She said, "But you have to spend," I think she put me back in shipping for a week, just as a punishment. But I just sort of sat there. I watched everyone ship the packages out. I took a lunch break, a week-long lunch break. And then I got back into the studio, and then from then on, it was clear sailing.
Wow.
So it was 3 months in shipping, October, November, December.
Amazing.
January, I was out of there.
Well, so you're now going into this field where it's male-dominated, and there has to be a sort of a hierarchy in place, like a studio hierarchy back then. So how did that whole situation work in terms of what engineers got to work with which artists, or which assistants got to work with which engineers?
That was all up to the production department, and there was a little nepotism going on there. For example, there was an engineer named Mike DeLug. You might know him, his name. Well, his wife, Vivian, was the head of production. So he always got on like Barry Manilow sessions. Gee, that was an accident. Oops. So anyway, that's how it worked. It was complete nepotism. It was favorites.
Yeah.
Totally.
Interesting.
They tried to
Interesting.
pretend it wasn't, but I saw through that so deeply.
Now, I'm going to throw a few names at you from that Media Sound era, and just tell me the first thing or the first anecdotes that would come to mind when
Okay.
I say them. These are artists, and I'm going to say the first one, Laura Nero.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, Laura Nero was everyone else was very thin and done up. Let's say had a lot of personality. Laura Nero was just the opposite of that. When she walked into the studio, she looked like somebody's mom that got lost on the way to the DMV. I mean, she was wearing frumpy sweatshirt and a very plain denim skirt, mid-knee, flat shoes, hair uncombed. It didn't bother me, but it wasn't the norm back then. Boy, was it not the norm.
Yeah.
But fantastic talent, and my favorite record of all the records I worked on back then.
Yeah. Which
Yeah,
was?
Smile,
Yeah.
with Charlie Colello produced.
Beautiful record. We had
Yeah.
Charlie here as a guest on Inside the Musician's Mind last year.
Am I sitting in Charlie's
You're
chair?
sitting in Charlie's chair.
I have
yeah.
a picture of me and Charlie from just a couple years ago.
What an amazing guy.
Yeah.
The Talking Heads.
Oh, Talking Heads. Okay. Well, when the Talking Heads first arrived, they were very shy. I don't think they had been in a studio like Media Sound before. And they were quiet. And also Tony Bon Jovi was producing them, which was not the best match. And so they didn't really know what to expect. And as the record went on, they became very upset with his choices. Back then, one of the ways to make a record was to, if you couldn't play an instrument, they had a professional musician, the Wrecking Crew, do your part. And that was happening with that record. And also, I think they put some kind of orchestration on the record, which was also very common. I actually think the record came out very nice. But they really butt heads with Tony. And, I was there to see that, kind of hold their hands through that. But David Byrne, very, very, very quiet person. Chris Franz, I'm still friends with him. He was a very friendly person. So they didn't say much on that record, but I worked with them later on with Brian Eno, and that was a
Yeah.
whole different
Yeah.
story.
Now, which was the album with Tony Bon Jovi?
I guess
That's
Talking Heads 77 must have been the first. It was the
Yeah,
first one,
first
whatever the
album.
first one was.
Yeah, and then later with Eno, they did a number of records with Eno. So you
Yes.
worked as the engineer on those albums as well.
I was assistant engineer
Yeah,
on those.
yeah.
I was still, in training, but at that point in time, I was doing senior engineer work on some things and assisting on others.
Sure, sure.
And they had an outside engineer, so
Oh, wow, okay.
who was Ed Stasium.
Yeah.
And so that outside engineer could pick whoever they whomever they wanted as to help them.
To
And
help them out.
so he usually picked me.
Now, I'm going to just sort of bring this in because when Charlie was here, one thing that we asked Charlie to explain was what did an arranger and a producer actually do? So we've been throwing around the term engineer, but just to give folks who may not know, just what was a session for you? You went in and what was the,
Well, first, there's aligning the machines, and you would get information about if it was a tape that was coming from another studio, there would be all these tones at the head of it, basically technical stuff that you had to align your machines to the machines that the tape was coming from. If it was our virgin tape, then we had to put the tones on so that if it went anywhere else, because oftentimes artists did not record in one place for one reason or another. And then, of course, depending on what was happening, like was it going to be basic, it was called basic tracks, if it was drums, bass, guitar, nothing to do with the vocals or the sweetening, which would be orchestration or any kind of percussion, overdubs. Cell syncing was a term for any kind of we're going to do the guitar solo or a sax solo today. So we would have all that information from the production department the day before. We were to look at the schedule the day before to know what we had to set up for. So I would come in earlier and set the whole room up so that the talking heads, the producer, the engineer could just walk in and just start doing stuff,
Right. Right.
you know.
And
so.
they're off, basically.
Yeah, it's sort of like a physician's assistant.
Yeah.
You know how they do everything,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you've never even seen your doctor? I don't even know what my doctor looks like. But I call my physician's assistant doctor, and she's not. I call her Dr.
You're
Rickard.
prepping for surgery. You're like all the instruments out.
She
and
does
getting
everything.
Right.
We do everything together. Why do I need him?
Well, going from musical extremes here, I did the Talking Heads, and I'll jump an extreme and then come back to another extreme. The Ramones. What was
In
that?
a way, the Ramones and the Talking Heads to me were in the same park.
Okay.
Yeah, because they were all non-musicians.
Interesting.
And
Interesting.
nobody wanted to work with them, actually. I think Ed had to pick me because I was a female and nobody wanted to work with me. So there I was available. So, yeah, you know, very similar approaches. When I say non-musicians, I mean the Wrecking Crew guys, they read music. They played their instruments for decades and could produce anything that a producer would ask for. I'm a non-musician, so I call them the troubadours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a troubadour, and Andre Turan, my music partner, he's more of a musician than me. He actually knows the notes on the guitar and the chords and the keys and all that stuff. I'm just, winging it.
You wing it very well.
Oh, thanks, thank you.
I said I was going to do extremes. Said the Ramones. How about the chairman of the board? How about Frank Sinatra?
So Sinatra, well, he came in with an entourage, which was kind of unusual and usually not allowed. We always discouraged bringing girlfriends and bodyguards and everything like that. So he came in with a bunch of people, which was fun and interesting. Famous people, as some of you may know, his famous bodyguard, Jilly, was there, and his wife, Barbara Marx, who used to be married to one of the Marx brothers, I think Chico.
Okay.
I'm not positive, but
Wow.
so he was a disco record, and someone tonight asked me, well, was he into it? And he showed no indication of whether he was into it or not into it. He wasn't going, that's great, or I hate this. He was very professional, and he did his best to sing the part. That was the thing that was playing, by the way, when you walked in. It was the actual session. If you want, do you want to play a little of that, and I can explain it, or is it maybe?
Any way to
maybe
line
we
that up,
talk. Maybe we do it at the end, okay?
We'll play it back at the end a
Yeah,
little bit. Yeah.
a little bit, and I can explain it. But
Sure.
you hear the tape rewinding, and you hear people talking, and you hear Frank whistling while he's waiting, that kind of stuff. Everyone was nervous. I was not nervous. You see me in the picture with him, standing next to him and Charlie Colello. So three of us deciding, is this take good? I look back on that and I go, I don't know, Frank. Why don't you do that part again? I think you closed up on that A.
Wow.
Well, everyone was afraid to tell him what to
course.
do.
Yeah, of
Actually, I
course.
kind of wasn't. But I wasn't going to step on any toes there. Too many Italians. I'm half Italian, so I can say that. But man,
half of you
I
can say
was
that.
asked to be on the session because they thought I was full Italian.
Brilliant.
I act full Italian.
There you go. You mentioned him earlier, and talking about the different types of producers and the people that you work with. Brian Eno is a very unique soul. And what was it like to work with Eno in the studio?
Brian Eno, yes. Back then I thought, this guy, I don't know. I don't know if there's any hope for him in the music business. I'm still shocked he's like where he is. Because you have to understand, I actually played on music for films. And Eno was my favorite person to work with, besides Ed Stasium. Ed Stasium and Eno were my people. In the end, that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to go to work and work with them. Brian, we met the night before at Max's Kansas City. And I was with someone who said, oh, look over there, it's Brian Eno. You got to go say hi to him. You're going to be working with him tomorrow. You should go say, go. And I wasn't the kind of person that would do something like that. I don't have those kind of like skills. So I went, I don't know why, and I said, hi, which one of you is Brian Eno? He was sitting with Fripp. And they both looked at each other and rolled their eyes and then looked away from me. And then I went, well, I just want to say that I'm Ramona, and I'll be working with one of you guys tomorrow at Media Sound. And then I walked away with my tail between my legs. So that was our first interaction. He didn't even look by, didn't say anything, right? Said nothing. So the next day when he walked in, carrying his shoes and his bare feet, I might add, he looked at me as I'm setting up the session behind a console that has 1,200 buttons. He said, oh my God, it's you. He goes, I can't believe it. Oh my God, there's no female engineers. I just couldn't believe it when you said that to me. When you walked up to me, I turned to him and I said, well, I don't know who you are. I said, I've worked with the greats. Barry Manilow, Frank Sinatra, I'm just naming them. And I'm like, I don't even know who you are. Somebody made me go up to your table. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Where can I wash my feet? Wow. And that's when I really thought he was the greatest person on the face of the earth. And I had to turn around. I said, oh, my God, I just love this guy. And I said, well, I can't send you to the bathroom because Keith Richards was there the night before, and there's blood all over the ceiling. So that's not going to work. Let me see if I can get you upstairs to the owner's apartment where you could wash your feet in his bathtub. Would that be okay? And then from then on, he worked very hard to make it up to me. I'm telling you, he did.
That is too much.
Yeah.
So you worked on a number of projects with Eno.
When he can I tell you about the time I played on his record?
Sure, yeah.
He would always be like, Ramona, I've got such a good idea. And I'd be like, what? He would call me on the phone before the session. Nobody calls anybody on the phone before the session. No producers call you with some great idea. So one typical idea of his was, Ramona, he goes, I'm going to do a game today. I can only use what's in the studio, in Studio A. I can only use what's there. So are the timpanis there? I'm like, no, they're in B. He goes, can you get them there? I was like, you're fucking cheating at your own game.
Oh, that's funny.
And then, so one day, he's like, Ramona, I want you to play on this cut that I'm bringing in. Now, I had, mind you, let me just explain something. I think I was working with him on Talking Heads. I didn't know what his music sounded like. So one day I asked Ed Stasium, I said, what does Eno's music sound like? He says, I'll lend you an album. You can take it home and listen to it and bring it back. I put on Babies on Fire, maybe 4 bars, off, back in the sleeve, returned the next day. Can't stand it, I said.
Wow.
I said I couldn't even, Ed asked me the other day, did I return the album? I said, Ed, I returned the album so quickly, you probably didn't know it was gone. I brought it back as fast as I could. Because for me, I was really into really great singers. And I know he has a good voice, but he is not a natural singer. And he knows it, and he'll admit that. So anyway, he says, I want you to play on one of my cuts. And I was like, oh, okay, but okay, what do you want me to play? And he said, the Hammond B3. Oh, I don't know how to play an organ, sorry. Oh, that doesn't matter. I said, yes, it does. Of course it matters. I have no idea. Well, what key is the song in? He goes, it doesn't matter. Never mind the key. I'm like, well, how can I play it if you don't even tell me the key? I said, I used to play the Hammond organ, but I can't reach the pedals. I said, is it okay if I play without the pedals? And he said, I want you to just go out there and hit any note but the F sharp. So I was like, But in fact, Ed the other day said, "Do you remember when Eno made you play on his record?" Yeah, gave him such a big fight, such a big fight. Finally, I did. I played on Alternative 3. You won't recognize anything as the Hammond organ because he immediately started turning all kinds of knobs in the studio. And I hit the F sharp more than once, but he didn't turn around and go, "Oh, let's take that again." Nothing like that. I came into the control room with my tail between my legs, practically in tears. I said, "I don't even want to hear it. Can I do it again? Can I hit the F sharp. Oh my God. It's just awful." And he said, no, it's great. And then I thought, he's lying. He's never going to use this.
And he did.
Of course he did, yeah.
Because he's Brian Eno. That's typical Eno. Someone who we talked about earlier, who was a guest on the show, Charlie Colello.
Oh, yeah. Charlie, I saw him a lot. He arranged music for so many artists. He was just like a media sound person. You know, it was like, so when is Charlie coming in? And very humble guy, an arranger, so not a big bravado or, you know, my impression of the arrangers were that they were kind of the geeks of the music business.
Sure.
You know, they didn't want to be on stage necessarily. They wanted to do it precise. They had charts, things to hand out, notes to correct. He'd go through it. Oh, that D flat, you know, that should be a D. Okay, you know, that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
They're the geeks of the music business.
The unsung heroes, though, really. I mean,
Totally.
Look at the
He's
body
talented.
of work.
I appreciated him actually later in life
Sure.
when I could understand what he was doing.
Yeah, in retrospect, when you started having more of an
Yeah.
understanding.
Back then,
Yeah.
I didn't really know. I mean, there were other arrangers, too. They always did the same thing. You had to set up lots of instruments. They conducted it. They had music. Each musician had their own part. They had an assistant. I always found that interesting, who ran around with the music. And then he would go tick, 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 and then he would conduct it like we were at a concert. And sometimes the lead vocal wasn't on there, so all you would hear was the orchestration, so you didn't really know. And it sounded, without hearing the record with it, you
Out
didn't
of context.
necessarily know what the heck was going on.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
certainly
out of
didn't.
Context. all that shading happening when you're not hearing the
All
prime
I knew
stuff.
is that I was going to have to set up a lot of microphones, and then I have to take them all down.
Now, how was working with Barry Manilow? I know you worked with Manilow.
Worked a lot with Barry Manilow. Barry Manilow was the person who they all thought was the person to work with back then because he was #1 on the charts. And Ron Dante and Barry Manilow were a hit-making machine. They had formula, and they followed it.
Mm-hmm.
They got songwriters. They got professional arrangers. You know, they looked through songs. They looked at lyrics. You know, he doesn't sing something you don't get.
Exactly.
They did that old formula where he was the singer. They have a pool of songwriters. Sometimes he'd get his name on a song because you could do that and just say, I won't do this song unless I get my name on it, because he wanted also to be a songwriter. And maybe he did contribute something at some point in time. I'm not sure.
Sure.
But they were very tight. They used to write jingles together. Not a lot of people know that. Before, they had a lot of money
You
before
bet.
they got in the studio. And
Yeah.
they figured, hey, we're writing these hit jingles. Let's, State Farm. Barry
Yeah.
sang that and they wrote that. What is it? Be a Good Neighbor, State Farm?
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, that's Barry
Yeah.
Manilow, yeah.
There's so many of them.
TWA.
He does
big ones,
the
big.
the medley on his live album of all those. And Ron Dante now out with the Happy Together tour. He now does
Oh
it
my
too.
God, Dorian
does
Gray out with the Happy Tour.
Isn't it amazing?
Yes.
Ron Dante
I worry.
he was the voice of the Archies, for those of you
Yes.
who don't know, and was also a producer. And Ron, at whatever he is, 70-something now, still looks like he did probably when you were working with him
Like
however
he's a
long ago.
15-year-old boy.
Yeah.
I comment on it all the time to him. I just plain out call him Dorian Gray. I think he's got some secret with the devil. I really do.
Well, you were in an unusual position working with with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, because you worked as an engineer while they were producing someone else's record.
Yes.
Very strange spot to be. What was that experience like? working
Well,
with-
they were producing John Phillips' solo record, John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas. And they were calling themselves the Glimmer Twins. And you have to realize this was a deal between three very big drug users. Well, maybe not Mick. Okay, we won't put Mick
Right.
in that pile. But definitely between Keith and John, okay? So the deal goes like this. Hey, let's make a record. Yeah, okay, let's go in Media Sound. Okay. Okay, did anyone book time? Maybe Mick did. Okay. Well, Mick doesn't want to show up when they're there. It was either Keith or Mick. Mick came when the background girls were doing the vocals. That's when he came to sing on the record. But basically, it was mostly Keith and John, which meant nothing much got done.
in the studio, anyway.
Yeah.
Wow. Strange experience that must have been.
Ugh, I have to say, I didn't like those sessions because they started late at night, around 10 o'clock at night, and then you would wait pretty much all night, and sometimes they didn't show up, didn't call, nothing.
Wow.
Nothing, and we just had to keep the coffee going and keep everything ready for them for whenever they're going to show up.
You entered the Stone Zone. You were working in Rolling Stones time. It had nothing to do with the rest of the universe, basically.
And I'd have
Wow.
to park Keith's Jaguar. Yeah, they didn't even ask me if I drive or had a driver's license. Just throw the keys. Throw the keys. Never drove in New York City, by the way. Lime and green Jaguar. Boom. Could you park this? I didn't even know how to park in New York. And then the other thing, I was very tempted to take one of his guitars home because he was always losing them.
Losing
Oh my
guitars.
gosh. Losing,
Wow.
yeah, all the time. As a matter of fact, I have a picture of one of his guitars that he was left behind that we're all like handling.
How funny is
And
that?
speaking of losing things, the master tapes were given to Keith at the end of the session,
Oh, no.
and he took them on the, what is it, the QE3? QE2?
QE2, yeah.
The ocean
boat,
liners, they
yeah.
went into the hull. Well, he just left them there. And they sailed around the world for decades. And finally, somebody was cleaning out the hole, and they found them, and they didn't know where they should go. So I guess somehow they went to England. They ended up in a burn pile. And Keith was just about to torch them in his backyard because he didn't know what they were. He forgot that he produced a record with Mick and John. And somebody said, "Hey, wait! Before you burn those tapes, let's look at them. Let's just, hey, did you ever do anything with Mick and John Phillips? Oh yeah. We made a record together. Well, here it is. So, 35 years later, not kidding you, that record came out.
Amazing. Well, and again, working on Rolling Stones time. It's 35 years later. That's nothing. Wow. Now, while you were at Media Sound and all this is going on, you were also busy playing in a band.
Yes.
So, can we talk a little bit about the Comateens and how the band was formed and what that musical scene was like for you? It was sort of, you were operating in a couple of different worlds, really, then.
Yeah, Comateens, I formed Comateens with Nick Dembling, who was the receptionist at Media Sound. And I don't know, I just had a feeling about him. I was walking past the receptionist's desk, and I thought, this guy, he has to be more talented than just being able to answer the phone. So I said, do you play an instrument? And he said, yeah, I've been in a couple of bands. I've been in the Special Jellies, and I've been in, he had a couple of good band names that he was rattling off that I didn't know of. I said, well, I'm a songwriter, and I really would like to, I need to make a band. And he was like, okay, great, I'll make a band with you. That's how it happened back then. And we found out that we lived 2 blocks from each other. I was on 86 and he was on 88.
That works.
Yeah.
Proximity is major in the city.
So I would just walk over to his house with my guitar, and sometimes he would come pick me up so he could carry my guitar for me because I complained that it was too heavy.
Chivalry.
And then we formed a band, Comateens, and played at CBGB's and all of Max's and just all of those places, Hurrah, the Ritz, Savoy, Peppermint Lounge, just talking about the places in New York. And yes, so what would happen was then, so I tried to just work in the daytime then at Media Sound. And
Sure.
wouldn't take any night, which was the cooler time to work. But I was not into, I didn't care about being a recording engineer. I still didn't, even though I was one. And so I just played at night, because at CBGB's, you'd sometimes go on at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Sure.
So I'd work on Sesame Street during the day and work and play at night.
Talk about being in two different worlds, from Sesame Street to CBGB's. Doesn't get any more varied than that.
Well, Media Sound became my job, my just, day
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. But by night now, working with the Comateens and in that whole scene, it was a great period for music then. So you were probably working with and seeing a lot of different bands come and go during that whole scene as well.
What I learned at Media Sound was invaluable, and I was just a teenager when I started, so I really absorbed stuff that I do know now, is like, how do you blend with somebody when you're singing background vocals, how to create background vocal parts, how to record and mix a record. I mean, that's like innate in me, like riding a bicycle.
Sure.
Like they can't take that away from me. And being at CBGB's and all that stuff, that was just very chaotic. That's how opposite it was. At Media Sound, things were not chaotic. It was $250 an hour to rent the studio. That was without musicians' costs or studio instrument rentals. And we were trained to be very quick and to diagnose things. If there was a problem, a noise that was happening, to diagnose it very quickly, resolve it very quickly, and that's still in me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And as we saw earlier, you continue to write, you continue to perform live currently with Andre. And what keeps the fire going for you? What inspires you to want to continue to write, continue to perform? And it's also too interesting because Andre's singing some of your compositions, of course. So it's having the voice have to carry to someone else, which is a unique situation. So how does that all work for you?
Well, what keeps me going actually is Andre's voice. You should give him a hand because he's such a great singer. And if he weren't singing, if he weren't available to sing music that I'm writing, I don't know so much if I'd go and look for anybody else.
Sure.
I love really great singers, and I think he's one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw that earlier too. I'm going to jump to the now. You've expanded your work as an artist beyond just the world of music onto the printed page, onto creating some wonderful pieces of art, 3D art. How did all of the other sides of your creative nature come about in terms of bringing things to fruition?
A lot of bands make T-shirts, and I couldn't think of a good logo for JANTURAN, so I make my own clothes, and I have a lot of clothing scraps. So I started to make these ugly dolls, which are called ook dolls, one of a kind, OOAK. And so I said, well, why don't we just bring these to a show one night and see if people will buy them as our merch. And that's what we've been doing. We've been selling the ook dolls. And then someone told me that I had enough of them because they all have little stories, miserable stories. They have miserable lives. But they're hopeful. You should read some of them. They're tied around their necks, their stories. As you're leaving, you could read this, or you could just open the book. So they said, you have a book here. You have a picture of the doll and the story. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that's a book? And they're like, yeah, you have a book. So he helped me make a book. He's an animator, Seth Feinberg. And he laid the whole book out. He designed the book. And so we have the book. and we have 2 CDs. We have a CD called Legendary for sale tonight that actually has a little booklet inside with pictures from Media Sound and all the stories, the creative processes of each artist, what it was like to work with them and how they manifested their records. So that's for sale. And we have a CD of our original music, which you heard, and the dolls and the book.
Wonderful. So after we're done, have a look back there, take some JANTURAN home with you. Quickly go through some general music-related questions, and then we'll do the Dirty Dozen, similar to the ones that used to close up inside the Actors Studio. What would you call the qualities of, like, the perfect song? What's the perfect song for you?
It has to have a memorable melody. It doesn't have to be complicated, but memorable, and lyrics that make sense,
Okay.
that tell a story, create vivid pictures.
Okay. Can you name 3 of your favorite musicians or songwriters, living or dead? They can't be anyone you've worked with.
Oh, okay. Well, as far as singers, like I said, I gravitate towards singers, so it doesn't necessarily mean I like the material, although some of the material I do. I love Amy Winehouse. And, you know, I'm very picky. So, Andre, who else do I like? I know, I don't like anyone. Sorry to say. I don't listen to music. I never did.
Interesting.
I didn't grow up listening to music. I didn't collect records, besides those 2 that I bought off you know, no, because music is coming through me all the time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So you're tuned into your own channel, basically.
yeah,
Is what it is.
Exactly.
And that's what helps keep the creativity going.
Yeah, I love what Amy Winehouse, there's just something about her that she's just so natural and easy, such an easy, natural singer. Laura Nero is a great natural singer, but I can't count her because I worked with her.
That's true. Okay.
That was the rule.
We'll let that one slide. We'll take that one. Is there a particular piece on the CD that you where you, or all the pieces, when you finished something and you walked away and you said, okay, done exactly the way I wanted it, exactly how I imagined? And is there anything you've ever wanted to go back to later on and say, oh, I should have done that, or I could have done that, or anything?
I like to remix things.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, and subtract stuff out. So that's something I would do anytime to any of our songs. But generally, there's a few songs that I think that, you know, yep, that's done. We don't have to do that one again.
Beautiful. Okay. Again, this is something similar that would happen in the James Lipton Show. How do you hope that you will be remembered 100 years from now? How would you want this sentence completed? Once upon a time, there was a person named Ramona Jan, and she...
Well, I would have to, that would be a different subject. She cured her own cancer.
Okay.
That's how I want to be remembered.
Okay. And you are in the middle of a struggle right now. We're bringing it up. So but thankfully.
I was diagnosed with advanced cervical cancer a year and a half ago, and inoperable. And I have been curing it with alternative means. Let's just say alternative. No, absolutely no medical intervention. I was told I'd be dead by now.
And you're doing wonderfully,
Yeah.
which is beautiful.
All my symptoms are gone.
Amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's absolutely.
So that's what I want to be remembered for.
Okay. And you mentioned already what your strongest motivator is for composing, and a lot of it is having
Yeah, Andre,
Andre's
if,
voice.
you know, yeah, I would totally not do another song if he wasn't there to sing it. There'd be no reason.
Well, finally, here's what we call the Dirty Dozen. In the Lipton, there's only 10. We've gone back to Marcel Proust and added 2 back that we're missing. And we'll start with this. This is the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you, what is your favorite word?
Oh, gosh. Right now, at the moment, sawdust.
Sawdust. Okay. What is your least favorite word?
Sawdust.
I see an internal conflict there, Ramona Jan. What turns you on?
Chocolate.
What turns you off?
Noise.
Interesting. What sound or noise do you love?
I like the that Tibetan bell. Ding.
Lovely. Who's your favorite fictional hero?
What?
Who is your favorite fictional hero?
Fictional hero.
Yeah.
Boy. Let me think.
I'm going to add, this is the one that everyone gets hung up on. It's very interesting.
Yeah, because first you have to know what fiction is.
Well, there is
Fiction
that,
is
true.
like a made-up thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really read much fiction or any
Okay.
fiction, so I can't say I have a fictional hero.
Okay. Jeff, write this down. We're striking that question. We're getting Jeff just went like this. Who is your favorite non-fictional hero?
I have many of those. If I had to think of a hero, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's
Okay.
pretty much a hero.
And you may have answered this one already. What sound or noise do you hate?
That I hate?
Yeah.
I just hate any general loud noise that keeps going on and on.
Which I think now I understand why you're not living in Manhattan anymore.
Anything very high pitched, like like beep 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 beep, like a watch going off or a car alarm. It's a any high pitched.
Okay. What makes you want to swear?
Everything.
Okay. What profession other than yours would you like to undertake?
Probably clothing design.
Cool. Well, you're doing that, which is
Yeah,
wonderful.
just for myself though.
What profession other than yours would you absolutely not ever want to undertake?
Anything that has like a normal schedule to it.
There.
Like we have to be somewhere at the same time every day.
Got it.
Any of those professions.
And finally, this one. If heaven exists many, many years from now, what would you want to hear God say when you arrived at the pearly gates?
You have to go back because you have unfinished business.
There you go. And that about wraps it up. Did we take a few questions? If anyone has any questions for Ramona? Any hands going up?
Do we have
Any questions?
lights so we can?
Yeah, we
see
want to bring the
people?
lights up if anybody has anything.
Oh, you can just yell them out.
Or anyway. Oh. Did you ever work with Linda Ronstadt?
Interesting question. Okay, well, Linda Ronstadt was a California person, but she did come to the studio specifically to meet Brian Eno on a day when I was working with Eno. And of course, this was like, spontaneous. It wasn't like, Brian, when you come in today, Linda's coming by. So we just get a phone call, and all of a sudden, we find out Linda Ronstadt's coming over. And so it was kind of funny because I couldn't figure out why would she want to meet this guy anyway. And
Clean feet.
and all the guys got so excited. He got excited, and whoever else was in the room, it was all men. Oh my God, Linda Ronstadt! Oh, the big sex symbol, she's coming to meet you. Oh my God! And he's like, oh my God, So she comes in, and I don't know how they felt about her, but she was heavy then at the time, and she had not good skin, so it wasn't, it was not what they expected, and she was not exactly what I expected. She was very, oh hi, I've been wanting to meet you, and she's talking a lot and stuff like that, and he's a very shy, kind of mousy person, you know what I mean? You can't be too overwhelming with him. So she was big and overwhelming, and he was like, and it happened real quick, and she whirlwinded in and through the studio and out, right? Talking the whole time. And he's very quiet and more like Eckhart Tolle, okay? So Eckhart Tolle meets the whirlwind of Linda Ronstadt. Nothing happens. It's like this. But they were like, yeah, I'd date her, you know, and she left.
So Brian Eno never produced a Linda Ronstadt album, I
No.
guess is where
No.
that's going.
No.
Never
But
happened.
that's not the right approach with him.
How funny
You
is
know?
that? A question right there?
Did you have a favorite artist that you worked with?
You mean as far as like what it was like to work with them, or what they finally produced?
There you go.
Okay, well, it's actually two different people. Eno was my favorite person to work with. What he produced for himself, I wasn't crazy over. What he produced, you know, how he produced the other groups, you know, made sense to me. You got to realize that I worked on the first ambient record, and nobody knew what that was. What the hell was going on, you know? There was no beat, there was no key. What's going on here? There's no tune, no words, no, you know, anything. But Laura Nero was the one that product-wise, that I felt the closest to, the only record that I actually brought home that I wanted.
Wow. Wild with all of that.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
And learned all the songs.
Back there. Oh, there are two artists I didn't mention.
Okay.
Madonna and
Yeah.
Bowie.
Well, they're just little anecdotal stories. They're not actually about being in the studio, but yeah, I had a rehearsal studio in the music building, which was like around 38th and 8th, and Madonna was trying to sleep there. It was a rehearsal studio, and she needed an apartment, and I needed a roommate. And somebody told her that I was looking for a roommate, and so she called me on the phone and asked if she could come and see the apartment. So I lied and told her it was already rented, and she hung up on me.
But you would have been living with a material girl, and anyway, I'm sorry.
That's
it was
why I
terrible.
didn't want to.
And and how about that David Bowie?
David Bowie.
You had to bring that one up.
So Bowie was, unbeknownst to me, I had played a gig at Hurrah with Comateens. I got off stage. We had just pressed our single, so I was going to give it to the DJ, and I went into the DJ booth, and I didn't know it, but David Bowie was in the booth. And he was kind of like in a corner or whatever, but he had just seen our show. And the DJ knew me, and I was giving him the record and talking to him, and he goes, "That's Bowie over there." And I'm like, "Yeah, where?" And I look, and he sort of signals me and pulls me by the arm to come over to him and plants a kiss right on my mouth, bends me over like Gone with the Wind, and gives me a big kiss. Doesn't even say hi. It's
Well, that was
unbelievable.
saying hi.
Yeah. And then he starts chatting me up, and I'm talking to him, and I see out of the corner of my eye the girl who's in my band. Her name was Lynn, and she loved David Bowie, and she hated me. So I thought, this is going to be trouble in my band. David, I got to go. And I just ran out of there.
Wow. So that was, I mean, that was an encounter, though. That was
It was definitely an encounter. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, back there. Working with the Talking Heads. I'm just reciting the question for the video. Working for the Talking Heads. How did Tina Weymouth, who was the female bass player in the Talking Heads, fare as being a female in that band?
Well, first of all, she was married to Chris Franz. They were married. They were boyfriend, girlfriend, and then they got married somewhere along the line. So they were a couple. So, and originally it was just a trio. So when I worked with them, it was David, Tina, and Chris, and nobody was going to get rid of, Tina. So, but as far as like Tony Bon Jovi, one thing that, happened was that Tony had all her parts done over by a session bass player. And I don't know if those tracks were used or how it ended up in the mix. I just know that her tracks were re-recorded. I don't know if that was because she was a woman, so it didn't sound, you know what I mean? I don't know how those decisions were made. But yeah, they would talk about, the guys in the studio, would say things like, oh, she's so little, how could she hold the bass up, that kind of stuff. Oh, it's just impossible.
And then you watch her playing live, and the movie stopped making sense, and she was a wicked bass player.
Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic player. So, any other questions? All right. Well, I want to please thank our very special guest, Ramona Jan, for coming out tonight. Please thank Andre Turan for sharing their incredible music with us.